know what I ought to say. And if there be any word good for the use of edifying, give it, that thou mayest minister grace unto the hearers. Grant that I may speak boldly. I open my mouth wide, O Lord. Do thou fill it. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. On the day of Easter, two men were walking on the way from Jerusalem to a town called Emmaus, talking about the things that had happened there. While they were discussing, Jesus himself drew near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. During their conversation, they laid out all the historical information about what happened to Jesus. But simply giving the historical information did not satisfy Jesus. The importance of what happened in Jerusalem had not yet been conveyed by the facts alone. It was not until Jesus confronts these facts with the scriptures that they come into focus. Jesus needed to teach them how to see properly before they could grasp the importance of the history. Today's gospel is a bit of a dumping ground for parables, but it fits in a larger section where Jesus is teaching the crowd how to learn from his parables. It's like the first day of class. A couple years ago when I was in a class with Father John Baer, a brilliant professor of the early church fathers, the first day that one comes into class, you sit down and feeling confident because I've read all the texts and I feel that I have a good understanding of them. Then after the introductions to the material, we dive in, and he shows us that the understanding we think we had is nowhere near sufficient and in order for us to actually understand the text properly. Then after he teaches us over a number of times, we can finally begin to see as he sees and understand the text as he understands it. This is how Jesus is working with the parables in chapter 13 as a whole, the chapter we've been in for the last 3 weeks. First, we get the parable of the sowers, where the seed is thrown on different soils. Then the disciples are confused about why all of a sudden Jesus has switched tactics by teaching to them in parables. Why do you speak to them in parables? To which Jesus answers, to you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For to the one who has, more will be given, but from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. This is why I speak in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. Seeing must be attached to seeing the works of Jesus being done before them and believing in him. Hearing must be in reference to the teaching of Jesus, but he doesn't say they understand. So he helps them by explaining how the parables are working. Then he tests their new understanding with the parable from last week, the parable of the wheat and the weeds. But before they get the interpretation like we did immediately last week, he gives them 2 more parables, 2 of our parables this morning. The parable of the mustard seed and the parable of the leaven. These 3 together speak of small things growing but with danger in their midst. We don't normally think of them this way, but the birds of the air mentioned that are nesting in the branches of the mustard seed, that mighty shrub that grows from the smallest of seeds. These birds had just been mentioned as those which steal the seed which falls on the path, or in Jesus' interpretation, the evil one who comes and snatches away what is sown in the heart of the hearer of the gospel. And leaven likewise is rarely a positive image in the Bible. Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees is how Matthew uses it most in his gospel. So here we have mixed images. Good things growing into great things, but with danger there in the midst. And then Jesus gives another interpretation of the parable, just to make sure that they are still tracking with him. And he ends his interpretation. He who has ears, let him hear. Now we get the remaining parables in our gospel lesson today. Two of these are about understanding what they have found. The parable of the treasure in the field and the parable of the pearl of great price. In each of these, there is a person who is searching for something of great value and then finds it. And when he finds it, he then sells everything and returns to buy it. Finally, there's the parable of the net. Still in the context of learning about how parables are used, the net in the parable is the teaching method he is now using. The good fish are those who are hearing and seeking to find out more in an effort to understand that this is what they are searching for, that they may sell everything and then follow. And these are sorted into containers. But then the bad fish, or those who have not bothered to find meaning in these hidden parables, are then thrown away by the angels into the furnace of weeping and gnashing of teeth. Have you understood all these things? Jesus asked them. Yes, they understand that. Now that they have the understanding that he was seeking to provide, now they understand the way they now have the vision that he was seeking to instill in them. Just like in class with Father Bear, Jesus has to open their minds to the proper way of thinking, and then they can proceed. Now that he has opened their eyes, and they want to believe and follow him, we are contrasted with those who are living in his hometown. They no longer know him. Where did this man get his knowledge and these mighty works? Seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear. Is not this the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary? Where did this man get all these things? And they took offense at him. There's a portion in Mark's gospel where Jesus is healing a blind man. But it takes two healings for him to fully heal. Jesus first spits on the man's eyes and then lays hands on him. Do you see anything? Jesus asked. The man looks up and says, I see men, but they look like trees walking. And Jesus lays his hands on the man's eyes, and then he sees clearly because his eyes have been opened. The man, after he has his eyes opened for the first time, was actually more of a danger than when he was blind. When he was blind, he knew how the world works, and he knew not to trust his eyes because they couldn't tell him anything. But now that he could see, but he couldn't see clearly enough to see any pitfalls that would cause him to stumble and injure himself. This is the Christian who has begun to have his eyes open to the life of Christ, but still has a foot left in the world in which he was blind. These are the disciples of Jesus who have the history of the events of the gospel, but not the mindset in which to properly understand their significance. This is me when I had read all the assigned texts for the class, but I still not yet had my eyes open properly to be able to understand what I was reading. A little leaven leavens the whole lump, as St. Paul teaches his church in Corinth and his church in Galatia. Then he says, cleanse out the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, as you are really unleavened. The church, he is saying, should not function according to the ways of the old leaven. He is saying that if we are not careful when baking old bread with old routines, we may forget that we are baking new bread and then toss in a bit of leaven, which sours the whole thing, making it only fit to be thrown out, because it cannot be leavened. In all of the parables today, Jesus lets us know that history unfolds as it will. It is the net thrown into the sea that gathers fish of every kind, good and bad. and as such, it cannot be avoided. However, the Christian who has been given the eyes to properly see will know this, but will proceed with eyes open to the gospel and not merely to history. The eyes of the saving works of Jesus Christ and the new perspective it provides to be able to go through the world, not stumbling about, being a danger to himself and all who are around, by adding to the leaven of the Pharisees into the lump. But this Christian will see properly, will see clearly enough to be able to see the past leaven and not include it into the recipe. The Christian is given the eyes to see and the ears to hear, to find the great treasure hidden in the field, and then to sell everything in pursuit of its purchase, that they may dwell there forever.